The topic of this talk is one that I always enjoy talking about. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart because it involves students. And okay, for some reason, okay, there it goes. So when we talk about mentoring, there are a number of different definitions of mentoring, and they're very diverse. And I've looked up a few of them in the literature. For example, one-on-one non-judgmental relationship in which an individual voluntarily gives time. I won't read all of it because you guys can read for yourselves. Another is support, assistance, and advocacy. A third definition is an adult who can provide a pupil. In my opinion, a lot of these definitions are obsolete because mentoring has evolved into more than that, particularly the third definition. I mean, many of us can think of our younger kids mentoring us on computers. Even my assistant Halle is much younger than me, but she definitely mentors me on the use of computers. And so I think of her as my mentor in that area. But the definition I like is a wise and trusted person who assumes responsibility for another to impart, and this is one that I've developed through OSI, to impart knowledge or skill by example and experience through an exchange of opinions and ideas in order to reach decision for a plan of action which facilitates increased learning ability. I think that's a general enough definition that it should cover almost everything. So what is mentoring? Many persons will say, well, I'm a teacher, therefore I'm a mentor. And I contend mentoring is more than teaching. In order to be a true mentor, you can be a teacher, but a mentor must function in four different roles. First, you can be a teacher. Second is you should be a counselor. You exchange opinions and ideas with your mentee. Third, you should be an intervener. You should help come in between a mentee and a particular problem and help to modify that problem. And you should be a sponsor. You should assume responsibility for a person or a group during instruction or apprenticeship. And the way I think of mentoring is that it's very much akin to the same sort of scenario I would have with my own kids. If I mentor a mentee, I take the same pride in their accomplishments that I do in my own children. And that's where I feel that you should feel about all of your mentees. And therefore, I have hundreds of kids. As a matter of fact, a young woman was speaking at the Novushe chapel yesterday, and I hadn't seen her in a while, and we were talking about where she's going to move to next, and she's moving to Charlotte. And I said, wow, Charlotte is one of my model cities. And I've never had any family there, so I've never visited there. She said, well, now you have family there and surrogate grandkids to come and visit. And that's the way my mentees tend to feel about me, and I tend to feel about them. If we think of mentoring as trying to get toward a particular goal, and maybe there are obstacles to that goal. In this case, I designate that obstacle as a brick wall. And on the other side of that brick wall are obstacles. Now we can devise our own plans as to how to get over that brick wall, maybe climbing it, or cracking a hole in the wall, or if we're wealthy enough, take a helicopter and fly over that wall toward our goal. Or if you look to the far right, the mentee has walked far enough that they find that that wall is not completely blocking you from the goal. But the problem is that wall might be long and extensive, and so to take that route could be a long route. And so the way I describe mentoring is a way of knocking down that brick wall. In order to overcome the obstacles, you take a battering ram and you just knock that brick wall down, and that's exactly what mentoring does, in my opinion, so that you don't have to worry about the wall. So mentoring others, what's in it for you? This statement was a quote from the electronic news of the New York Academy of Science, and that was January 25th, 2019, almost 2 years ago. It says, if you're pursuing a successful career today, et cetera, the encouragement of a mentor can be a critical element of success, particularly if you're in the STEM field. And that's essentially what I believe. But many people will say, well, why do you do this mentoring? What's in it for you? Well, let's go over that. What's in it for the mentee first? The mentee gets advice and guidance from a counselor with greater experience, a lasting friendship, improving self-confidence and self-esteem, increased motivation, the yellow brick road to success. In other words, a paved road that leads them toward success in their particular career. But what's in it for the mentor? The mentor gets an opportunity to develop skills and understanding and working with others. And as professors, we know that no one person is exactly alike. I've had 70 graduate students and none of them are exactly alike. In fact, we know that we cannot apply the same rules to every graduate student. We have to modify our rules to fit the particular students. The other is you get an increased understanding of the needs of others. Many people have very much different needs. They're not all the same, as I indicated. You get experience in helping others to achieve their goals. To me, that's a deep satisfaction. When a mentee of mine achieve their ultimate goal, I get an extremely deep satisfaction. And here's that deep inner satisfaction. And development of future mentors. In order to develop future mentors, you must encourage mentees to go on and duplicate what you have done. And that allows the cycle to continue. Because when you're gone, if you're doing all this mentoring, and first of all, you can't possibly mentor everyone. And so the more mentees you train to mentor, the more people will be mentored. So when I came to LSU, this was the front page of the LSU Advocate, the morning, not the LSU Advocate, but the Baton Rouge Advocate, Morning Advocate, is that University appoints Emory scientists to be West Chair. I would venture to guess this is one of the few times that a Black face was on the front of the newspaper. This was in fall of 1992, probably about the time that I visited you guys the last time. And the reason I mentioned, I can talk about Emory, I can talk about Texas A&M, but I honed my mentoring skills at LSU. And so I tend to focus more on LSU. I can talk about experience. At Texas A&M, I knew nothing about mentoring. And in fact, it wasn't until probably the middle of my career at Emory that I discovered I was a mentor. I knew I was doing certain things, but I didn't know to call them mentoring. And it wasn't until a young man, when I attended a Nobuche meeting with a few of my students, who most of whom happened to be African American, and this young man turned to me and he said, Isiah Warner, the greatest mentor of all times. And I looked at him thinking, why is he joking like this? Because I didn't think of myself as a mentor, let alone a great mentor. And so I just thought of it as a joke and kept on walking. Well, since I've come to LSU, there have been a number of articles written about what we've done at LSU, and this one appeared in Chemical and Engineering News 2001, about 9 years after I arrived at LSU. And if you look at it, what the title is, What is Louisiana State Doing Right? LSU, largest producer of African-American chemistry PhDs, boosts a model graduate education program. And then the article goes on and talk about what we're doing. at LSU and LSU's past history. Well, let's look at LSU's past history. In the entire history of LSU before I came, they had never produced more than 3 PhDs. I'm sorry, 6 PhDs, but they had never had more than 3 African-American PhDs at one time. And they never produced more than 6 African, in fact, they had produced exactly 6 African-American PhDs. The first African-American, as I'm sure it's the history of Texas Tech, LSU was segregated for a number of years. And the first African-American PhD was produced in 1971. Richard Evans, who was at Alabama A&M for many years, and he died recently. He died earlier this year. Mildred Smalley, who was one of my teachers at Southern, and then Don Pryor, who was a contemporary of mine. We both grew up in Avoyelles Parish and both knew each other. So those were the first 3 PhDs from LSU. Now, if you look at this diagram, you can see that there's a period from 1975 to 1981, where one person is indicating that one person, I'm pretty sure was Don Pryor, because it took about that long to get his PhD. In the overlap period, further back in 68 and 71, that was when Richard Evans and Mildred Smalley were there. Richard Evans started in 65 and finished in 71, and then it dropped off. So that was what it looked like for that time period. And I select that time period because before that, there was nothing. So nothing existed at all. Now look at what's going on. And if anyone wants to guess when I arrived at LSU, you can look at this chart and tell that in 1992, there was a sudden jump in the number of African Americans. Remember, I told you before that there had never been more than 3 African Americans in the program at one time. In 1992, there were 11. How did that 11 happen? Well, there were 2 African American matriculating in the program, and 4 had applied to come to LSU. I came in with 10 graduate students, half of whom were African Americans. Those 4 that applied heard that a new endowed chair was coming to LSU, and that person happened to be Black. So all 4 of those admitted or committed to LSU. So here's a program that never had more than 3, suddenly had 11. I became chair of the department in 1994. And suddenly the numbers start to increase. And about 1995, Ted Greenwood, no, it was 1994, Ted Greenwood from Sloan Foundation came to me and said, wow, you guys are really doing well. If you promise to increase the numbers, then we can provide you with about $30,000 per student. I said, Ted, I don't know how these numbers are getting up there, and I don't think we're going to get any higher. And so I said, the best we can do is write a proposal that say we'll keep the numbers the same. And he said, you can write that, but we will not fund you. No matter how good you're doing, we want an increase in the numbers. 2 years later, in 96, I ran into Ted and he said, how many African Americans do you have? I said, 33. He said, I thought the numbers weren't going to increase. I said, I thought so too. And so that's where that article came about that we wrote in 2001. These numbers started growing, and we wanted to know what are all the factors that increase those numbers. And in fact, over the 10-year period from 1995 to about 2013, we averaged about 30 African Americans in our program. Now remember that I said before 1992, we had never had more than, we had a total of 6 African Americans receive PhDs. Now the number is 89. And note that I don't count those 3 before. So when I count those three before, that would be 92. But we produced 89 African-American PhDs, which I think is an astounding number. So an article was written in Chemical Education that even brought some additional information to light for us. We had not paid attention to the fact that there was also an increase in the number of women PhDs. And so that article, independent of us, said that we were ranked #1 out of the top 50 university. Top 50 is defined in terms of grant monies acquired from the National Science Foundation. We were ranked #1 out of the top 50 universities in percentage of PhDs awarded to women and underrepresented minorities. We were astounded to see that because we knew we were #1 and, well, we felt certain we were #1 in underrepresented minorities, but to see that we were also #1 in percentage of women. When we disaggregate the data, what we see is that looking at this, UC Berkeley is #1 in the average number of degrees. Berkeley produces about 65 PhDs per year. LSU produces about 19. And so they're #1 in terms of the number of degrees produced. We're number 36 out of 50 in terms of number of degrees. In terms of ranking percentage of women, they're 20. We're #1 in the country. We produced 49 PhDs to women over the period of 2005 to 2008. Look in terms of the percentage of minorities, we're #1. But not only are we #1 for the percentage of minorities, we're #1 in the total number of minorities, even though Berkeley produces 65 PhDs, only 10 of those are underrepresented minorities. Purdue is number 2 behind us, and a far #2 behind us. And you see Texas A&M is number 10. And so that's what that article essentially said. Now, what are the selection criteria we use in terms of the African-American underrepresented students? We look at their GPA, look at their letters of references, their GRE scores. Now, we do look at GRE scores, but we do not weight them that very heavily because we found out GRE is not a true reflection of how they will perform in our program. The best criteria for looking at, the reason I rank these is because GPA and letters of references are more important than the GRE scores. Now, I used to write the chemistry GRE, and even the GRE, even the Princeton group that writes the GRE said that the GRE alone should not be used as a sole criteria. My computer's about to run out of power. As a sole criteria for admittance into the program. Personal interview also proved to be vital. And so those are the 4 criteria we use in terms of admittance. Now, we use those not just for minority students. Once we learn that those criteria were the important ones, we apply those to every student. So even white students who didn't quite have the GREs were admitted based on all of those criteria. So what are the success factors after having these students? First, they provided mentoring and support as the normal students are. The proximity of HBCUs, we're surrounded by HBCUs. I mean, in Texas, there's Texas Southern and Prairie View. We've had students from those and a number of HBCUs in Louisiana and Mississippi. There are a number of HBCUs. And so that helps LSU in terms of recruiting. Critical mass. Now, what a number is for critical mass, apparently in our case, 11 was a critical mass. Once we got 11 African-American students in our program, it began to build. There was a faculty collusion. Now, what am I talking about there? A couple of faculty started looking at the GRE scores of the African Americans and noted that they were lower than the most of the rest of the student body, and started telling a few of the graduate students that I was admitting. Now, I wasn't even head of the chair of the admission committee, but I was admitting inferior students into our program. Now, I think if a white person had been chair of the department, they would have ignored that. I didn't. I hit it head on. What I did was call a faculty retreat and then talked about all I had planned for the department because I was chair of the department. Here's what I plan to do. I introduced a new endowed chair that I brought into the department. And so I was all this excitement among the faculty. Then I invited the graduate students over. And I stepped away and brought in a facilitator and let the graduate students talk about all of their gripes. And sure enough, it came up. The white students started talking about these inferior students I was letting in and how I was denigrating their PhDs and their PhDs wouldn't be worth anything, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was an exchange back and forth. And the facilitator handled it very well. So I had no gripes about how the facilitator handled it. So when we get back, one of my African-American students came up to me, Dr. Warner, these are our friends saying these things about us. I said, yes, I wanted you to hear that from them, not from me. And I had been hearing this, so what are you going to do about it? And the student said, don't worry, we'll take care of this. And so the Black students started working together. And if one of them failed, they would work with that student to fail their general exam until they passed their general exam. And pretty soon, the African-American students were outperforming the white students. Now, how can you continue to call somebody inferior if they're outperforming you? And so that whole idea went away quickly, that I was admitting inferior students. I think if there had been a different chair of the department, that it would not have been handled as well. Self-sustained recruiting. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but happy students recruit more students. Employability. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Companies started coming in, wanted to know what we were doing at LSU. Dow Chemical, for example, at the headquarters in Michigan, they called down and said, are you guys recruiting at LSU? No, you guys told us to recruit only at the top 20 schools. Well, get over to LSU and see what's going on. And so they started coming to LSU, even gave money to the university. Procter & Gamble gave money to the university. And I told them, okay, you guys can recruit here, but you're not going to just recruit our minority students, you're going to recruit all of our students. And so that benefited the entire student body. And so we have lots of students at Procter & Gamble. So mentoring graduate students, they were excited about the research work. Faculty had positive interaction with these students, good communication, high marketability. Again, I emphasize we had the same evaluation criteria for all of our students. We didn't treat them differently. We created diversity in groups and therefore PhDs, and we know that nowadays diversity is an important part of even boards that oversee companies. If you have boards, they want diversity on the boards. Diversity in research group helped to improve those groups. And we took advantage of programs like Bridge to the Doctorate and those sort of things. What did the students do? They did things in the community. They were active on campus in leadership activities. They're active as campus tutors in the Center for Academic Success, active in community charitable activities, active as role models for undergraduates, elementary, middle schools, and high school students. I can remember when some of our African American students would go out to be high school, out to these various middle schools and high schools. They would come back. A number of students would say that these students are now saying, "Wow, you got a PhD and you're so young. I want a PhD." I can recall when I was at NSF as a rotator, there were two guys we brought in, both white from MIT, who had been actively working in the minority community, doing things to encourage more minorities to get into the sciences. Now, let me describe these two guys for you, and you'll understand why I'm describing. They were like Mutt and Jeff combination. One was tall and slim, one was short and stocky. And so I asked them, I said, what's the most common question that you're asked when you're out in the minority community and recruiting? They said the most common question we're asked is, are you guys twins? And from my description, there is no way you could consider those guys twins. But the minority students, all they saw were two white guys. Didn't matter that they were different. And so that's why it's good to have diversity in terms of recruiting. We were even listed in US News as a hotspot for diversity. And I was mentioned by name, and I had friends all over the country calling me and said, you were just mentioned in the US News report, so those were exciting times. What's the rationale for success? We had faculty buy-in. Faculty understood that something special was happening and participating. Mentoring. Students were mentored by their advisors and other. Now I put in quotation Roy. Roy was a young man, and later on we found out we were first cousins to the same people. So we had family ties by marriage because we attended a funeral together and found out. But Roy was not very educated. He had a high school degree probably, but not more than that. Yet the Black students would flock to him for advice. And we started giving a staff award, and we named the staff award for mentoring in his honor, because he was the person who controlled the stock room. But you couldn't go by the stock room and not see a group of students sitting in there taking in his knowledge. We know that knowledge is not just given by PhDs, but knowledge and mentoring can be done by lots of different people, and he was a very effective mentor. Formation of cohorts, critical mass, students who were mentored then mentored others. Funding, I mentioned the funding from Procter & Gamble and Dow. Collusion, I talked about that. Self-sustained recruiting. Happy students automatically recruit more students. So if the African Americans were happy, they recruited more African Americans. That's how the numbers began to grow. Employabilities. Companies started recruiting at LSU. Here's a photo of my group in 2013. And you see some degree of diversity in my group, but my group varied from time to time. If you took a picture of my group 5 years later, this is what my group looked like. I had 15 graduate students, 14 of whom were women. And the interesting thing is, this young man is the only graduate student. This is a postdoc. I had to bring in a postdoc to have more males in the student. This young man is husband of this young lady. And so all of the other people in my group were women. And see that some of them are minorities. And so I got a reputation for being very fair to women and minorities. So what if I wanted to talk about my career accomplishment? Many people say, how can you accomplish anything mentoring all of these students? Well, I want to show you that my career did not suffer. First of all, I got a PhD, a BS, and a high school diploma. You might wonder, well, why in the world would someone list a high school diploma among their degrees? Well, the reason I do that is because I was the first in my immediate family to get a high school diploma, let alone a college and a degree and a PhD. So I proudly parade out my high school diploma. My father had a ninth grade education, and he later on went and got a GED. My mother had an eighth grade education. I was raised by my grandmother who had a third grade education, who was the wisest woman I know. I have approximately 380 refereed publications, H-index of 64, numerous awards for research, and also numerous awards for teaching and mentoring. I've graduated 70 PhDs, more than half of whom are women, and more than a third of whom are underrepresented minorities. So I think you can agree with me, I have not had a poor career. I brought in more than $60 million in grant fundings. And when I count these funding, I only count those where I am either PI or co-PI. Now the $15 million is funding directly from my research. The $45 million is education funding. So total is $60 million. And I was PI or co-PI on all of these grants. I received an award from the Allstate Insurance Company, and it was called From Whence We Came Award, and that was in 2004. And I felt that that award best described what I was doing. And it was a mentoring award. And the award featured the Sankofa bird. Sankofa bird is a symbolic symbol from the country of Ghana. Now you notice this bird is flying forward, but he's looking backwards, and he's holding an egg in his mouth. What's the symbol? The symbolism here, and quite often the Sankofa bird is featured as walking. This is my depiction of the Sankofa bird. I've never seen it depicted this way, but this is my depiction. He is flying toward the future while observing and learning from the past, and also simultaneously carrying the future in his mouth, the egg. I've always thought that that was quite a symbol that I've adopted from the country of Ghana, and one that I will always remember because I was first introduced to this symbol by this award. Since then, I met a number of people from Ghana who've told me about the Sankofa bird. In fact, my pastor was from Ghana, and he gave me the actual symbol carved from the country of Ghana. And so, as I indicated, the egg in his mouth encourages us to plant a seed for the future generations, to mentor those who come after us. Select awards. Excellence in STEM Mentoring and Presidential Award. That's from President Clinton in 1997. Lifetime Mentor Award of AAAS in 2000. Case Louisiana Professor of the Year in 2000. Board Professorship of the LSU system, which is the most distinguished level you can achieve at LSU in 2001. Howard Hughes Medical Institute Professor in 2002. ACS Award for Encouraging Disadvantaged Students into the STEM field, 2003. Southern Chemist Award from the ACS Memphis section in 2006. Fellow of the American Chemical Society, I was in the inaugural class in 2009. ACS Award in Analytical Chemistry in 2013. That's the highest award in my field given by the ACS. SCC Professor of the Year, American Academy of Arts and Sciences, 2016. Fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry, 2017. National Academy of Inventors, 2017. Nature Award. Now, at this point, I've made it internationally. This is the Journal Nature Award for mentoring in science. And I received, as a matter of fact, I'm a co-recipient of that award. Someone else in Texas received the award also in 2019. Out of all those awards, I'd ask you to think about which one you think would be most significant to my home folks. Back in Bunkie, Louisiana, population 5,000. And I don't think you would be surprised that it's SEC Professor of the Year. None of that other stuff meant anything, but being SEC Professor of the Year, that must be a big deal. Warner must be a big deal. So they organized Isiah Warner Day in Bunkie, Louisiana, because I was SEC Professor of the Year. None of this other garbage that he won meant anything. It was SEC Professor of the Year, and they got to see me on television during the LSU-Alabama game. That was a big deal. I found that interesting. So let me quickly go through some undergraduate programs that I've developed, hierarchical mentoring. And in particular, I'm going to talk about the STEM Research Scholars Program. The objectives of this program, we were funded by the National Science Foundation. And we wrote a proposal that we were going to recruit 25 high ability STEM students per year with approximately 90 students per year steady state average once we got the program fully running after 3 years. We're going to have a diverse participants, and that was important in Louisiana. Believe it or not, students in Louisiana mostly attend private or parochial schools. The public schools are, except for the small towns, the largest still segregated. For example, Baton Rouge itself is about 50% minority, but the public school system is 80 some percent minorities. So we wanted to reach a minimum 75% retention rate, which is quite, we thought, quite an ambitious accomplishment, and we were hesitant to put that on there, but I'll show you in a minute what we actually did achieve. We wanted to encourage and assist at least 50% of the participants to pursue PhDs. So this 75% retention is to retain them in STEM fields. So what did we do? We had a supportive, motivating, diverse environment. Now remember that most of these students came from schools that were essentially segregated. And so to create a diverse environment, that was not easy. Matter of fact, the biggest problem on opening day was trying to get them to sit together. We divide the room in half. One half of the room was all white. The other half was all black. You know, they were just accustomed to sitting separately. And we focused on so much on diversity that the students would early on would ask us, why are you guys talking about diversity all the time? We're tired of this. But eventually it became just a part of the programs that they accepted it. And guess what happened? Many of these students became close friends. A white student who would never entertain the idea of having an African-American best man would have an African-American best man, or an African-American maid of honor. These kind of things happen, and vice versa. Some of the black students had white students as their best man. I mean, it was such a transformation that when you saw what happened, it literally brought tears to my eyes. If you don't know me, I'm a very emotional person, so I cry pretty easily. I'll say that. As a matter of fact, I had a summer student in my group She was just there for the summer, and her mother called to let us know that she had passed away. And I decided I'm going to call and console this woman. When I got to talking with her, I burst out in tears, and this woman is consoling me about her daughter dying. It's comical now, but I was so embarrassed because that's the kind of person I am. I'm a very emotional person. I care about people. So academic success is divided into mentoring, education, and research. We built a pyramid, and what we call this is a hierarchical pyramid, where I'm at the top and I'm guiding other faculty who are mentors as well as research mentors. And here are the STEM scholar students in the middle. Now, to reinforce their mentoring skill, they must also mentor high school. Oops, didn't mean to do that. See how I can get back. Yeah. They must also mentor high school students and middle school students, while at the same time be involved in peer mentoring. They mentor each other. So this mentoring scheme worked very well. While being mentored, these students learned how to mentor others. We had summer bridge programs, cohort experience, community of learners. During the academic year, they developed educational research and mentoring skill. We had courses, and I'll talk about those courses in a minute. Over the 4 years, there were no credit courses because we couldn't add to the curriculum for other students in terms of the number of hours. They were restricting the number of hours. Community, they were required to do community service. And they had to attain 70% of their goals in order to receive their stipends. And the stipends was not trivial. Here are the participants. If we look at the white, non-Hispanic, these are the women. 26% of students were women, 22% were white male. These are whites. Black, non-Hispanic, 17% women, 18% males. And these are Alaskan Pacific Islanders. These are Hispanic students, and these are Native American students. Most of these students were in the College of Science, another substantial fraction in the engineering. Remember, this is a STEM program. And then others were in College of Agriculture and School of the Coast and Environment. We had special selection process. I don't have time to go through that, but if you want to know about that, you can ask me later. We have improved study and note-taking skill, enhanced metacognitive skills, development of group interaction skill, time management. And that's the biggest problem of students coming out of high school. In high school, they sit in their rooms and study by themselves. And in college, they have all of these courses, and they don't understand that group studying is very important. And so we had enhanced science comprehension through research, development of mentoring skills. They also participated in summer bridge programs. First year at LSU, next year they have to go somewhere else. And I'll show you all the places. Stipend was $12,500 per year. Now, it's not as much as it sounds because out of that tuition was about $10,000 per year. So they have about $2,500 for room and board. I'm sorry, it was $10,000, and $2,500 for other things. Books nowadays, typically students have to pay $1,000 for books. So undergraduate research, I've talked about these things, writing skills. I believe that a scientist who writes well has an outstanding career. Presentation skills. We think that our students, by the time they graduated, were equivalent to second-year graduate students. This is one of my mentees. She worked in my lab, Dr. Christina Jones. She's now working at NIST, and I continue to try to get her to go in academics. If you're in mass spectrometry, you must have met this young lady. because they now form a group, a minority mass spectrometry group. She was a Georgia Tech President's Fellow. And when she finished, I received a letter from her committee saying that she had accomplished, she was as good as any student that they had ever had. Here are some of the summer bridge participants, and you see there is a mixture of students. And here are the courses that I talked about: freshman year, this was sophomore year, junior year, and the fall year. And just to pick a few, freshman year, we focus on study skills. Sophomore year, example is fundamentals of getting published. Review of graduate school portfolio. They were required to start applying for graduate school in the fall of their senior year. Grad applications. So these are just select examples of what this curriculum was like. They had undergraduate research experiences all over the country and including outside of the country. This young lady, Anna Norman, epitomized what the program was about. And she's a white female, but she got it. When she went to the University of Florida for her PhD, she designed her own PhD program, but figured out that she was very bored. So she started a program for working with minority students on her own and still finished in an appropriate amount of time, getting hoarse. And so we had 249 scholars out of that program since 2003 was when the program started. 158 STEM graduates. Then these are old data. I was just talking with my assistant and she's angry because I didn't have her update the data, but I just grabbed these slides and they're pretty old. The accomplishments are much more extensive. But look at this. If you look at LSU as a whole, highly selective institution and selective institution and moderately selective institution, you can see there's considerable disparity between males and particularly white males and females in all cases, and underrepresented minorities in yellow. In our program, the females outperform the males. I'm not sure what it is we were doing that allowed the females to outperform the males, but they did. And the minority students, who, remember I told you, primarily went to the public schools, whereas the white students went to the private and parochial schools, minority students were not very far behind. They're 85% graduation rate for six-year graduation rate for minority students. That is competitive with any school in the country. As a matter of fact, that's better than any school in the country. In a STEM field, 85% graduation rate. The rest of the students were close to 90%. We were very happy with the data. And if you look at the completion, 75% have completed or are pursuing post-baccalaureate degrees. Here's Dr. Byron George, got his PhD from Georgia Tech in chemical engineering, recruited heavily by Google, some of the big companies. Instead, he's serving as a consultant manager for another company, for McKinsey and Company. And I'm sure they're paying him big bucks for that because he had a chance to go to Google and some of these other big companies that we know pay well. So if he's doing this, he's doing really well. He's actually from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We had a STEM Connect program where we brought some of our past graduates back and try to talk them into possibly becoming faculty. That didn't work out well. They were all impressed, the deans and everyone, but no one made a move to do that. Now they want us to do it all over again. So, what are the key parameters for successful mentoring? And this is what I have put together for myself. No matter who the student is, your graduate student, your undergraduate, the first criteria is to believe in your student. If you don't believe in the student, don't start. Don't work with them. Listen to and understand their needs. Listen and discuss their problems to achieve an understanding of their needs. Believe in a solution. If you can do it, they can do it. Provide options. Do not make decisions for them. They develop confidence by believing that they make the decision. Even if there's one option, present that option as a possibility so that they can believe that they made the decision. Therefore, when they achieve success, they take confidence. It builds their confidence. So find ways to build confidence so that they can become mentors, even mentors of themselves. These are my supporters for the education as well as my regular research. I'd be glad to take time to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Warner. That is extremely inspiring and gives us a lot of hope here on how to move forward. We have a couple of minutes left. If anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, I haven't seen any come through in the chat, but I've seen lots of comments about how great this talk has been. So we appreciate that. Um, yeah. The comment was made that we hope that you're writing a book about all your experiences.
You
And
know, that's interesting that you mentioned that. I am in the middle of writing a mentoring book.
all right, great. Well,
And
let
a
us know
lot
when
of
that
this,
comes out. Yeah.
yeah, I'm hoping to get it out by next summer. I'm having a big retirement party next summer, and so I'm hoping to get it out by then. If any of you have any ideas of publishers that I can approach, let me know. I haven't even approached any publishers. If any of you have any ideas and can make suggestions, I appreciate it.
That's great. Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much. This was really, really great. For everyone who is still on, we'd love to have you once again join our STEM memberships for STEM course, stem.ttu.edu, and we'll keep you apprised of additional opportunities to join these types of sessions. We'll also post our video for today's session on our website as well. So Dr. Warner, thank you so much for taking the time
Sure.
to connect with us. We really appreciate it. You have lots of wisdom to give and pass on. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. For those of you who are going to connect, feel free. We will connect with him later. And also, if you have questions specifically for him, let me know and I can put you in touch as well. So thank you so much for joining. If anyone has any questions, feel free to pop on now. And if not, we will conclude the rest of the session for today. So thank you so much.